Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, a program where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with agriculture, with tourism, with mining, with education. We discuss different aspects of life and see how they affect our economy in this country. And today we are going to be talking about human rights, how human rights affect our economy in Zimbabwe. My name is John Masugu, and with me today I'm hosting the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, Jessie Majome. Welcome, Jessie, to Economic Forum.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Today we want to know how human rights affect our economy. But first of all, we want to know also the function of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission and how we can access it in order to understand issues that help us going forward in developing our economy.
And I will say that it is one of the institutions that were established by our 2013 constitution to support democracy. There's a chapter 12 in the constitution which has commissions that are about 5. And the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is one of them. They are the pillars of democracy. They are independent. They are called, and I quote, independent institutions supporting democracy, such as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. I can mention some of them. One of them is the Electoral Commission. The other one
the
is
Media Commission.
Yes, thank you. As well as in the Media Commission. And the Anti-Corruption Commission isn't in chapter 12. It's in chapter 13. I hope 13 is not an unlucky number.
Okay.
However, the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission is, while it is not in chapter 12, you're absolutely right to mention it because it is given the qualities that the chapter 12 commissions have, the independence, etc. Our constitution re-emphasized and reconfigured and deepened the identity of Zimbabwe as a modern democratic state, and therefore it was found necessary to have pillars that are independent of everyone, independent of government, independent of you, the media, of business, of religion, or whatever other foreign power, whatever it is, but that are independent and are there to support and promote democracy. And the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission's mandate is specialized in supporting and promoting democracy from a human rights perspective. So it is established its membership has 8 members that are selected by Parliament's Committee on Standing Rules and Orders and the President. They select 12 out of a very public process where people are invited to bring nominations. People can nominate themselves or they can be nominated by others. And Parliament's shortlist and select and conducts very public interviews where people can go and write maybe even questions or give views. And then they give the President 12 names. His Excellency the President selects 8 names. So, and then those are the ones that are appointed as commissioners, plus the chairperson, who is the 9th person, who is, in this case, none other than myself.
Yes.
And so our role is to facilitate and promote the deepening of a human rights culture in Zimbabwe. So our role is to stand as a watchdog, but also as a promoter. And I want to state, John, at the beginning that for human rights to prosper and to flourish in Zimbabwe, it is not the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission only that can make this happen. It is all of us.
Let's talk about the human rights themselves, because what happens is whenever we hear issues of sanctions being imposed on Zimbabwe or some punitive measures coming up, human rights come almost on top of the list. Which ones are human rights? What are human rights?
I'm very happy you asked me that question because I suppose my mission or my passion during this term that I have as a chairperson is to hopefully to try and contribute to removing the very unhealthy association that has been made of politicizing human rights, over politicizing them, and linking and thinking of them only at a very political adversarial level, both at the local level in Zimbabwe and also internationally. so that we get to remove those covers that are obscuring human rights from being seen for exactly what they are, because they are essentially about humans, about us as people. They are those essential entitlements that every person has, just by virtue of being a human being. If we just ask, well, is Jessie a human being? If the answer is yes, it means automatically I have those rights. They are called inalienable. They cannot be taken away from me. And they are indivisible. You can't enjoy, for example, they are all connected. They are so connected that you can't enjoy one without the other. And so those are what human rights are. They essentially they define who we are as human beings. They are about, because we're different from animals or from plants, for example. So what defines us is that we understand that as human beings, we have three qualities that are fundamental. One is our dignity as human beings, our dignity, and then secondly, our freedom and our equality. But you will see that the freedom and equality are also closely related to human dignity, because you cannot be, without freedom, you have no dignity. You are maybe like maybe an animal or a pet that we can lock up in a fence, or even livestock. Without without equality, you will then also be considered maybe as something that is less than human. Human rights are fundamental. They are we can't take them away, but we must continue to. That's why there's a commission that is there, and also our constitution has a chapter 4, a declaration of rights, that spells them out in our supreme law of Zimbabwe, because they can't, and we'll talk about it a bit more about how that chapter 4 is so important, that it's the most difficult, one of the two most difficult parts of our constitution to take away.
I'll stop you there, Jessie. Thank you very much for defining, human rights, as well as telling us about what your commission does. And what we want to understand about them being fundamental in the next segment is how then do we link those rights with our economy, because on Economic Forum we always try to link these with economic development. That's Jessie Majome, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. Join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing human rights, especially in the context of the work of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. And we've got the chairperson here, Jessie Majome, who is explaining human rights as well as how they affect us in our economy. I think the first segment we really were defining, but right now we want to link very much with the economy. But at times they can be selective. Is that deliberate, or it's something that is done unknowingly? Because yes, human rights are there, but people complain that, what you did to John is different to what you did to Jessie because you were selective.
The beauty about human rights is that they encompass every part of our lives, and they are for everyone. Like I said, they cannot be taken away. Everyone just has them. But but they are violated sometimes, because you see, we are human beings, and sometimes we want to promote our interests against others, and we are in danger sometimes of violating the rights of others. But the fact is, even if we violate a right, it doesn't mean that the right does not exist. It remains a fundamental right. It has to be protected. It has to be defended. It has to be fulfilled. So those would be infractions. And the good thing about them is that they're very more or less exhaustive and comprehensive. There's the right to, because we talked about equality, isn't it, as a fundamental element of it. There's the right to be treated equally before the law. So once there is selection, you clearly know that there is no equality. It means a right has been violated, and there are remedies that are available for that. And I want to go and just say the issue about sanctions, for example, that like I was saying, that regrettably, if we continue to link human rights in, how can I call it, political context, whether locally or maybe internationally, we are shortchanging ourselves, because in my view, John, Rights are
who is
so
shortchanging?
important.
Is it us who are affected as a country or those who are imposing them?
It is us who are shortchanged. If they are reduced to a political ping pong ball or a football, they are too important. I mean, they are way too important. I would use the word sacred to be reduced to like a political football or for whatever reasons, because they are our rights. They are, because once that happens, there starts to be inequality, even from the perception that maybe there are certain people who know about rights and who value rights more than others, and these ones are unequal. And then what that does, if we're not careful, we will start ourselves as Zimbabweans, as African people, shortchanging ourselves and being defensive and saying, no, we are not going to deal with rights because we are being accused, let's say, by Western countries. Yet, rights belong to us. If we go to our own African culture, the whole Ubuntu, the philosophy and the values of Ubuntu, those are human rights. If you are admonished in the traditional sense, you're told, this person has no Ubuntu, hana unu, maybe in the Shona culture. It's to remind us that no, behave in a dignified manner. And the next person is dignified. That's what rights are. It's about dignity, equality, and freedom. And I like to say this, that I'm hoping I say this often so that we remember. Like I keep saying, that human rights do not belong to the West, because this is why I'm saying that let us be careful, because we shortchange ourselves if we forget who we are and what our values and traditions have. So here we are in 2024, and if we're not careful, if we allow human rights to be used as political footballs, etc., we forget who we are. And again, because they are universal, they are human beings. The human beings who are of Western tradition are also human beings. They also have rights and dignity, etc. But we are all the same, we are all equal. If we go to their countries, because you will not also find that there's a perfect state of the recognition of human rights. We are all human beings. There are none that are more special than others. So human rights are the ideal that we all as humanity aspire to. They bind us, and we have problems. There are human rights violations in our country. There have been human rights violations in the past. We've had some very dark, from times even from before independence, racial segregation that was there during before independence in 1980 was a gross violation of human rights. The liberation struggle was a struggle of human rights for equality. After independence, we had gross violations as well that we know about, where as a nation there were issues that were also political from just after independence. We talk of the Kukuraundi massacres, when also the political opposition was forming itself after the 80s, 90s, there were gross violations. But that is why, we as a people, as a country, we ourselves, we remember who we are. And in 2013, we agreed to a constitution that we should be proud of. That is one of the broadest and deepest human rights protections that were not there. And so they are ours. So from even an economic point of view, you must remember that those rights, the right to life, civil and political rights, we speak as we are speaking here. From a business perspective, there are a lot of them. I hope we get a chance. I'm
interested in those, yes. Just add a few before we wind up this segment from a business perspective.
The right to movement, the right to reside, enter and leave Zimbabwe. You can see that trade coming in with goods, exporting goods, the right to freedom of movement and residence anywhere in Zimbabwe, the right to expression. If I've got goods that I've manufactured, I want to, without the right to expression, freedom of expression, to talk about them, no one will know about them. The right to property itself, it's a fundamental right that I can hold my money, even my ZIG labor rights, for example. The right to, they are everywhere. The right to health, the right to healthcare, the right to education, the right to propagate also freedoms. If we do not respect those rights, we cannot manage enterprises, we cannot trade, we cannot sell things, we cannot manufacture. Certain people will be prevented from doing so. So we can go a lot about them. So its rights are everywhere.
That's Jessie Majome. She's the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. And in this segment, she also discussed how our business operations can be protected by the proper observance of human rights. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We're now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing human rights with none other than the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, that is Jessie Majome, who is also a lawyer, and a former politician. So when you discuss these things, you have that background, and it's interesting that you are now right there to talk about human rights. How then do you promote human rights within government and within the corporate sector and at individual level?
Our mandate as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission requires that we promote, isn't it, and defend also rights, and we also monitor situations, human rights situations, and also receive complaints from the public. We welcome them because we are there to complaints about violations of human rights, and we investigate them. We also have a mandate, John, that can be seen as separate, but it's really also a facet of rights: administrative justice. In our constitution, there is entrenched the right to administrative justice, and we actually have an act of parliament that provides that we have a right to administrative justice, and this is mainly for citizens, or even people who are not citizens who are in Zimbabwe, for them to ensure, for the law to make sure that those who hold public office, any public office, for example, even in a council office, the Knesset, the council office, the person in, let's say, the Registrar General's office who issues IDs or passports, or somebody who works for the veterinary services and runs a deep tank in the rural areas, or somebody who issues permits for, let's say, commuter omnibuses, or maybe tax officials at the border, that everyone who goes before them is entitled to be served well and to be served justly and fairly. We used to have what was called the Ombudsman's Office, the Public Protector in South Africa. They call it the Public Protector. Those functions are with the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. Our role is also to investigate, to listen to complaints from the public who've been dealt with badly and shortchanged by public officials, because when in service was, that's what they do. And this is also linked to the economy, because it also helps, because people have a right to get administrative justice. But also, if we promote that culture of complaining and complaining about bad and shoddy or rude or neglectful service or lack of service for service delivery by state officials in public institutions, we will, can you imagine what that does to our economy as a reputation that Zimbabwe will get in terms of ease of doing business? Because if it helps, it will enable those who hold office for the public to up their game and to be on the cutting edge. And Zimbabwe will actually be renowned for serving, for being a destination for investment, local and otherwise, and also for business. Because that's why I'm very proud of our Declaration of Rights, because it did something that was not there before. Because rights were the duty bearers of rights, used to be only the state, the government, that we say a citizen or a private person has a right to receive, to enjoy their rights from the government, that the government is the only one that must work like this. But you, John, now also have a duty to respect my rights. I have a duty to respect yours. And even people, corporate persons, people who are at law called legal persons, who don't breathe, are not human like you and I, they now have fundamental rights. They also now have duties. They must also, for example, in commerce and business, they have the duties. They have now, we enjoy the duty, let's say in a supermarket. We have a right to, they also have a duty to respect our right to life, our right to health, our right to safety, our right to security of the person.
Is that why some of the products have been removed off the shelves if they're a threat to life?
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, one of the, because Zimbabwe is serious about human rights, one of some of the functions that we have as a Human Rights Commission is that we have the right to inspect places of detention, prisons or even mental health facilities. And where there are complaints for human rights violations, we can direct the Commissioner General of Police to investigate.
Jessie, you're not the only ones who talk about human rights, although you are the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. But there are others in the NGO sector and others who call themselves human rights defenders. How do you work together so that the messaging about human rights in Zimbabwe is not distorted?
Okay. We generally have an open door policy because the culture of human rights needs everyone aboard. And we're happy that there are others in Zimbabwe who, from civil society, who also make it their mission to promote and fulfill rights. So we collaborate with them. For some of them, we have memoranda of association with them. For some of them, we don't. But what was important for us is that like I said at the beginning, human rights are too important to be reduced to a political football. Whenever rights are true by themselves, so we encourage, the promotion of those rights and the publicization, and of course, because so that the ultimate beneficiaries must be the human being. So we promote and we collaborate. We are happy to do that because it's the work of including individuals and businesses as well. We're actually looking forward as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission to even also, because in terms of funding, that's one of the biggest problems we have. Because the funding, investment, I will call it investment, we need as a country to invest more in the promotion of rights because of the effects and the impact that I said that from an economic point of view.
So that you are not compromised as a commission.
As a commission, yes. And also even for our economy, because we all win if we promote human rights. I mean, can you imagine? It's good for business, it's good for the economy in lots of ways. So we also want to encourage, from a business perspective, that businesses need to also learn that they have rights, but they also have duties. But for them to also even invest in giving education, because the more we know about what our fundamental rights are, the better we are. And we also want to encourage, because now with the whole Ukrainian war and even the wars in the Gaza, the world capital movement of money has changed. And traditional funders, for human rights, are now looking more that way. So we need to invest ourselves in Zimbabwe. The money that we have in our country from businesses, let's invest in promoting rights because it's good for our economy ultimately.
Well, Jessie, thank you very much for coming on to Economic Forum to talk about human rights, what you do as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, and how you promote human rights right from government level to the corporate world, as well as individual level. That was our guest, Jessie Fungai Majome, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, was telling us about all things human rights. If you have any questions that you want to ask on this program, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. And I'm sure there will be many of them to Jessie about human rights. If you'd like to engage with us as Economic Forum, you can also do so on the social media platforms that you are seeing on your screen. In case you miss some of the programs that we broadcast on ZBC TV and you want to watch them later, you can do that on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Jessie Majome and the production crew, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.